Leading agri-tech innovation is Sense Hub Dairy, the modular end-to-end dairy system combining animal behaviour monitoring, milk intelligence and automation in one connected platform, backed by MSD Animal Health.
You can have all the agri-tech in the world, but if you have regulation or legislation that impacts it, then it's very, very challenging. And one of the agri-tech elements that is exploding across farms, and we'll continue to talk about that here on Countrywide Connect, is around the use of agricultural drones, from everything from yield mapping to spray to fert, you name it, even mustering up a gully. Our drones are being heavily utilised. Now, an ambitious program to modernise New Zealand's civil aviation rules has commenced with Associate Minister James Meagher alongside David Seymour, and it's interesting in how it's going to roll out because they want to have more flexible ability, but at the same time we have a civil aviation rules here in New Zealand, and so it's really crucial that we can balance the stakeholders of the sky. Dr Isaac Henderson is joining me. He's the Vice President of AIANZ on reforming the rules governing drones. Isaac, thank you very much for your time. Now, tell me a little bit about your organisation and how you are contributing to this conversation.
Yes, thank you. Pleasure to be here. Yes, so I'm the Vice President of the Aviation Industry Association of New Zealand, and it's made up of several different divisions across aviation. One of those divisions is the Commercial Drone Industry Association, also known as AIANZ, which represents the commercial sort of UAV sector, but we also have the New Zealand Agricultural Aviation Association within the membership, and so but we represent the vast majority of commercial aviation in New Zealand. So those are the two stronger voices on the issue of the agricultural drone reform. The rules refresh program itself has been sort of talked about for quite some time. We were expecting an announcement from Minister Meagher. The surprise was when the announcement also came with the announcement from the Ministry of Regulation, which is under the prerogative of the Honourable David Seymour, around reforming agricultural drone operations.
You're really in an interesting spot as an organisation between your different members base, I can see, around agricultural drone operators being a fast-growing sector alongside the traditional aviation as we know it, and agriculture, for instance, our fert spreaders. So how is there an issue when there is licensing involved to be a UAV commercial pilot? Or is what reform will that see more control over getting a license, and how's that going to work?
So there is actually no licensing system for UAVs in New Zealand at all. And I think this is where the tension comes from predominantly with farmers. The example I used was a farmer operating a drone on their own property. And look, I think it's very important to divide agricultural drone operations into sort of two categories. You've got your smaller sort of 1 to 3 kilogram drones used for mapping, surveying, mustering, things like that, which are definitely in that more lower risk category, possibly some easy wins. But you've at the other end of the spectrum, you've got your agricultural spray drones. They're often, like your recent examples, around 150 kilogram maximum takeoff weight. They're the size of your dining room table, and that's more the issue where there's no equipment there. They're not toys, and they're certainly not low risk. And so, but what we have now, if you want to operate an aircraft of that size, doing spraying or spreading operations, you have to get certificated. And it's not an individually held thing. It's an organization gets certificated under Part 102 of the Civil Aviation Rules. And that means writing a manual that's sort of, 100 to 200 pages long around how pilots are trained, how aircraft are maintained, how you do all your risk management. It's a very similar process to what an airline or an airport goes through to become certificated. And so there's no middle ground here. You've got these general operating rules. You could buy a small drone and operate within those confines, no problem. You want to go buy a drone above 25 kilograms and start applying agri-chemicals, you're going to go down the certification process. And I think that's where, some farmers say, well, that's overkill, and you probably agree. The concern is there are very significant risks with those, and so we can't just remove certification unless we introduce something like licensing. So that's actually a solution the association is suggesting. We've suggested it for at least the last 5 years, is have a licensing system within for UAV pilots and ratings. So you could get a chemical rating and an agricultural rating in this context, and then it levels the playing field a bit. So a farmer wanting to do that on their own property won't have to go through a 6-month process and many thousands of dollars on consultants and CAA fees to do something that can actually be solved through training, competency and assessment. And that's the key bit. I'm quite happy to talk through what those particular risks are, but just to set the scene on what the current regulatory landscape is and why that, quite fairly does cause some problems for farmers wanting to use, evolving technology on their own properties.
Okay, so you have a Minister of Regulation that's all about cutting red tape and making things easier on farm, but at the same time, as an organisation, you're highlighting quite heavily the risk. So where's the middle ground, and what's the progress going to look like in this space, do you think, over what time frame?
Well, I think if you look at what the risks are, they are sort of well-known risks, right? So you've got a very large aircraft. It's got a lot of inertia. It's if you're starting to lose control of that, it's quite a hard thing to pilot, right? So we've got that pilot competency piece, and you can solve that through training and assessment. We've also got the maintenance requirements. So these aircraft, they're not like a helicopter or an aeroplane that's what's called type certificated. It's built to some sort of international standard, maintained to that. We're talking about aircraft that aren't built to any particular standard, and they need regular maintenance to remain airworthy. We get those two things right. That's important for the safety of the public, because it could be your own property, but it's a paddock right next to a state highway. If you have a loss of control event because the pilot's not competent or because a component fails and that goes off and hits a moving vehicle, the consequences are catastrophic. So that's what we would call the aviation risks. And then we have the environmental risks. So when you aerially apply an agri-chemical, it works differently to if you're doing a ground application, and you can get spray drift and inversion layers and things like that. We've seen examples of this already, where you apply some in this paddock and it ends up 5 kilometers down the road and it kills off a vineyard or an orange grove or quite a high value crop. And so we need to also protect other people's properties from that risk. So they're all well-known risks. We can solve it through training, competency and assessment, but we need willingness from the Ministry of Transport and the Civil Aviation Authority to actually implement a licensing system or some alternative that allows an individual to get that training and be able to use it. And certification, our current system, probably makes sense if you're doing it on third-party property. If you're an agricultural contractor, that's probably a fair threshold to have. But I would agree it's a bit overkill if it's only on your own property, and we, through training and competency and assessment, can make sure you know how to fly it, you know how to maintain it and where it's send it off to and how often, and you know how to manage the environmental risks of applying agri-chemicals aerially.
So, real conundrum that we've got here, Isaac, because, you've got a Minister of Regulation that's all about private property rights and you can do what you like on your own farm. But there is, like you said, the flow-on effect, particularly with spray drift onto a neighbouring property, that's of risk. So what is the aviation industry doing to be able to lobby this into some form of rules or regulation? What can you do?
Well, like I say, for the last at least 5 years. I was the chair of the UAV division until I moved into the vice president roles. So, we've lobbied for that for many years, but it's never been seen as a priority. And part of that is because we have a user-funded model for the Civil Aviation Authority. Really what we need is just for a short scope of work, probably some actual taxpayer funding to allow that to happen and actually view it as the public good it is, for ensuring the safety of the public and also enabling that future productivity if we get it right. But look, I don't want to discourage the Ministry of Regulation to look at it. The reaction from industry wasn't, don't look at it, because there's clearly some efficiencies to be had here, right? They're responding to a legitimate concern. The problem was the framing, when they're saying there's quick wins, we have proposals ready to go, this is a low-risk operation. We disagree with that characterization for agricultural drone operations. But look, we have reached out. We're hoping to engage with the Ministry of Regulation as they go through that work so that they can understand those risks and how to manage them, because, there are those tensions around, yes, you should be able to do what you like with your own property, but when that puts people's lives and people's property in danger, then that's not a fair trade-off. And so what I think makes sense is to look at and find something for a farmer doing that on their own property, a regulatory response that is more proportionate to the risk. That's the key problem, right? We've got disproportionate one way. We don't want to go disproportionate the other way. We need that middle ground, and there's a bit of tension there, but I'm sure, as the conversation evolves, that can be found. And as an association, we remain open to that ongoing engagement.
What's happening around the world? Because a lot of these companies are global manufacturers and distributors of this technology to that scale. If we're talking in that 100 to 150 kilo drone size, because, there could be a self-regulation model for the industry whereby they bring in licensing. The distributors bring in licensing to be able to purchase at point of purchase. But around the world, what are other examples of countries that have worked on this tension?
Well, we are the only developed nation at this point in time that doesn't have a licensing system for commercial UAV operations. People think of UAVs as this new technology. I've worked with them for over 10 years, and I worked in manned aviation before that, right? We've had licenses and ratings in manned aviation for at least 75 years, right? And it's worked because you've got standards for, this is what pilots need to know, this is what they need to be able to show they can do, and this is how you assess those things before you give them a license. And it's going to be a bit easier on the UAV front, but that's the kind of, thinking. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We've got to weigh that forward here. I think we should look at that, adopting it, or if we're doing an alternative thing, that's fine as well. But this is not a revolutionary idea that we've come up with. It's not going to be world leading. We're going to be quick followers at the best.
But Isaac, I'm sure you've read many a books of dare wars back in the day, and they certainly were, the last frontier when it came to jumping in those Bell helicopters unlicensed. Yeah. We have a culture of the Wild West when it comes to
our founding of the Aviation Industry Association was as the Agricultural Aviation Association a little over 75 years ago, and people got the Tiger Moths and customized them to do it. But you always have that, right? You introduce a new technology, it starts getting used, then regulations come in. So UAVs effectively, the Part 102 didn't exist until 2015. That's when the certification standard came in. But we're still stuck in the same binary thing of general operating rules or certification. I think we need a more mature system where we scale things up according to the level of risk and how easy it is to manage that risk. And while agricultural spray drone operations may not be a low risk activity, they are known risks. You can train people on how to manage them, and you can assess them against that to be able to give them that sort of permit. And that would give the safeguards we need as a society to enable more widespread use of that technology.
Well, thank God you're at the helm of this, Isaac, because you most certainly know what you're talking about with your experience, but also can see the middle ground, and that's a unique skill sometimes. I wish you all the very best in where we can maturely progress to not being the last little country at the world that does as it wants in this space. And as a drone videographer, I would love some training, and I think my team would really like me to undergo some training to stay a bit safer out on farms. But as we're talking a lot smaller. Thank you very much for your time, Isaac, and joining us on the show.